Welcome to the 76 Capital Leadership Series. My name is Wayne Kimmel, and I'm your host, as well as managing partner of 76 Capital, the venture capital fund that invests in the sports tech, esports, and sports betting industries. And we're really excited today on our 76 Capital Leadership Series to have a great guest. We're going to be talking hoops. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm excited about what we're going to do today. But as you know, what we're all about at 76 Capital is to look to partner, invest with entrepreneurs who are truly doing the next thing in the sports industry. We're super excited about, connecting with you, and hopefully we'll get an opportunity to reach out to us. As you know, we're easily accessible across social media, whether that's on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. You can find me, Wayne Kimmel, at Wayne Kimmel, or James Santor, our great producer back at the station, at James Santor. And of course, at 76 Capital across all the social media networks. But again, if you're an entrepreneur and you're truly looking to do the next thing in the sports industry, we want to hear from you. We want to connect with you. We want to see if there are ways that we can help each other make things happen. So let's get to it right here. We have a great guest. We have Coby Karl coming on our show, on our 76 Capital Leadership Series. Many of you may know him as the son of George Karl, the head coach of the South Bay Lakers, a former professional player in his own right in the NBA as well as in Europe, and the host of the Curious Leader podcast, which I'm excited to talk about that. Coby, welcome to our 76 Capital Leadership Series.
Thank you, Wayne. I'm excited to have a conversation.
Yeah, really excited to have you on the show. I mean, what you've done, what you've overcome in your life, all the things that you've accomplished, being someone who was kind of been on the started on kind of fortunately or lucky enough to kind of be on the sidelines in the, your whole life, not on the sidelines, in quotes, but on the sidelines, like next to your dad as a ball boy in the middle of it all, and then take it all the way to the pinnacle of basketball, the NBA. So what we do on our 76 Capital Leadership Series, Coby, is we want to kind of hear some of your story, what it was like growing up, and what kind of made you tick as a young kid, and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, of course. I guess when you just started talking about that, it does bring me back to my days when we were in Seattle. And when I say we, my family and my father, when he was coaching the Sonics. And, to be honest, the thing that drove our family, my father was a leader in that, was to win. And just seeing his competitive fire and being part of that group. I was a ball boy on the sidelines. Just being part of that group was, it was just that insatiable appetite to win and compete. That's kind of what shaped me as well. Is I grew up in my dad's meetings, and I grew up around, when you ask like who put your arm around me, one of the first guys was Coach Tim Gergerich. And I was around Terry Stotts a lot, and Dwayne Casey, and this coaching staff, and Bob Medina was the strength and conditioning coach. Like all these coaches also put their arm around me. So I grew up in this environment of preparation, and I saw how they made a practice plan, how they talked about different pieces working together. So that's kind of my initial insight into these players. So I was always curious to look at these guys to see if they did anything different.
So we have Coby Karl on our 76 Capital Leadership Series. He's the head coach of the South Bay Lakers, former pro player in the NBA and Europe, and host of the Curious Leader podcast. I mean, Coby, as you started to grow up, and I guess grow up from being just a ball boy to the point where you're starting to play and get, you're going into high school, and you're really developing your game. Yeah. Were you able to, really, did you have an opportunity to play and basically work out with some of the professional players?
As I got deeper into my career, as I physically started maturing, like in high school, and then definitely in college. Earlier, I would mess around. I remember Vin Baker played one-on-one. Like I said, Dana Barros would play one-on-one with me. The guys that kind of had like a little younger soul. But I didn't work out in general at a really young age. I've heard stories about like Dunleavy doing that, Junior doing it.
Well, I mean, you had a great career at Boise State, and then, after graduating, it was off to to professional basketball.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear, some of your thoughts around, you played in the NBA. I mean, I think one of the things one of the great, I saw one of your past interviews where you talked about where you're playing for the Lakers and, you got into the game and right away. I mean, it must have been incredible for playing for Phil Jackson and being, in the game, at the highest of levels.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny how life works, right? Is I grew up around the game, but Phil was so different. And my dad didn't have a relationship with Phil, so he wasn't in that circle. But I was always attracted to these leaders. Like I wanted to play for a Jerry Sloan. I wanted to play for Phil Jackson. I wanted to play for someone because I do believe in transformational leadership. Is that we need others to help us become our best self. And to your point, is like going into training camp, it was an incredible experience. One, Coby was on the team, and obviously he was disgruntled at the time, trying to get a new contract and pissed off that they weren't competing for championships. And going into that training camp, I played fairly well, and I was competing. Coby was our starting shooting guard, and I was competing at the shooting guard position. Sasha Vujicic, who ended up having an incredible year that year, was right ahead of me. But he was trying to find his way, and I think Phil used me as a tool to kind of sharpen his vision or focus, as a reminder that if you do mess up, that this kid's hungry and willing to participate. And so Phil threw me in there the first game of the season versus Houston, and I was a undrafted, non-guaranteed contract. First game of the season, Tracy McGrady turns the corner and I'm there, and so it was very surreal. Even though I spent so much time around it, I never really envisioned myself or saw myself in the games, right? And to my point earlier, is I was just a late bloomer, so I didn't have that success. I didn't make varsity until my junior year. I was a walk-on at Boise State, so that was always kind of been my story.
I mean, a lot of the things that you're talking about from a coaching and playing and perspective are a lot of the similar kinds of things that we see in the business world, right? In the types of things that entrepreneurs and executives really need to do. You talked about preparation earlier. You talk about really doing things precisely, doing things, and then also thinking about things differently. Like as an entrepreneur, you always have to think differently. If you're doing something innovative and you're not doing something, you better be thinking differently. That's what it's all about. And to hear that coming from you as a coach at such a high level is really interesting, and one of the things which I think will certainly help you and propel your career over the years to a lot of success.
Yeah, I hope so, and we'll never know, right? We're all on our own path for whatever reason, and this is the one that I've chosen. But I do believe in there's a couple things that come to mind. Is how you do anything is how you do everything, and then you might as well, if you can't do it at a really high level, why are you doing it? So rather than running 15 plays average, let's just run 2 plays. The kind of Lombardi, but I think got famous for it, is they had 5 plays. It was like run right, run left, whatever it was. It's just be excellent at the things that you do. And it's really difficult because the game is so dynamic and teams, for us, we have a travel party of 18 people. So you have trainers, you have strength conditioning coaches, you got players, you got coaches, assistant coaches, video, and just teams are so dynamic that I think sometimes we get excited as leaders, or coaches, we get excited to do these fun, complex things of X's and O's, and then we forget that if my 5th best player on the floor at the time doesn't understand it, then we're going to do it terribly. So you have to teach to the room. You can't just teach to your aspiration. And it's just a fun process. And I'm really fortunate and thankful to the Lakers organization and Joey Buss and Nick Mazzella and Jeannie and everyone who's given me a chance to coach, because I think it's going on 5 years now of head coaching experience, it's given me the chance to fail on many different levels and try these things on different levels without the pressure of the ESPNs or the newspapers worrying about it, or the shareholders getting upset about it. So I do think there's an extreme value in just getting the experience and trying things differently. And Phil Jackson came and talked to our staff at one point, and I asked him for one tidbit of closing wisdom before he left, and that's what he told our assistant coaches was be a head coach at the highest possible level you can be a head coach at. It doesn't matter if it's seventh graders, but just so you can get that trial and error experience. And I love that you talked about business and entrepreneurship, but I think for me, for sure, is like I tried to do what everyone else was doing, right? And that it's already been taken. I tell my daughters all the time, is like, that everyone else is taken. I want you to be you, and I think that's a message that I didn't really embrace as a younger man or a younger kid, and I think it's something that we lose in our society. Just to get on a broader topic, that let's just be excellent at who you are and figuring that out.
Those are great words of wisdom, and I love also on your Twitter account. And by the way, everybody who's watching and listening, go out and follow Coby Karl 1 on Twitter. That's his Twitter handle, Coby Karl 1. And one of your pinned tweets right now is "Be curious, not judgmental," by Whitman. Maybe talk a little bit why that's pinned up there as your top tweet.
Yeah, it's funny. We've my co-host on the Curious Leader is Brett Goldberg, and him as well, Wayne, and we talk a lot about Ted Lasso. And I don't know if you guys have seen it. If you haven't seen this show on Apple TV, it's one of the most incredible shows I've ever seen, and I almost call it like the Bible of coaching. And there's a great scene in there where he talks about it, and I won't go too deep into that, but I just like that quote is so simple. I love simplicity, one, and then two, it to me it really made me reflect on a lot of the failures that I've had were kind of self-inflicted, and to me when you talk about judgment, I think self-judgment is the most corrosive judgment, and it's something that I've dealt with in my life of not judging myself negatively, more so being curious, like, why did this happen, or man, that's crazy that happened. There's a very different, and they're almost on opposite ends of the spectrum. To be curious and to be judgmental is very different, and one allows you for growth. If you're curious, you can grow. If I'm really curious, like, man, that was crazy, I did that, like I wouldn't expect myself to do that in that situation. Why did I do that? And you can kind of investigate it. Judgmental there's a lot of shame involved. Brene Brown's one of my favorite speakers ever. A lot of shame involved. And, the more you look into that and do research on shame and judgment, it's a really dead end street. Is you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to grow. You can't kind of become who you want to become on that end of the spectrum. So, the judgment is something I try to avoid, and I can't do it all the time, but the curiosity is definitely something that I've really dove into over the last, whatever it's been, 12 months of being home with my family.
One of the things I want to touch on was your new, Curious Leader podcast. And you mentioned you're going to have, Phil Jackson, Nick Nurse. And so what really inspired you, or kind of, what was the impetus for you to start the podcast?
Yeah, well, I love having these conversations. Like these are where I really feel alive, and I learn the most is when I'm able to have conversations with people like you, or people like Nick, or people like Phil. And I was talking to, Brett, our co-host, who's working with my dad's podcast as well. And I just got off the phone the previous day with Masai Ujiri, who worked with my father in Denver, and now, as we know, is in Toronto as their president. And I had a friendship with him, and he was nice enough to give me 30 minutes of his day when they were out the bubble. And I think I asked different questions, like I'm not really a fan. I want to learn. I want to know. And I think there's a large community out there that are on that same journey. And I wanted to share that journey with them is let's ask these questions that can help you, Wayne, and that can help me, not the questions of, where did you grow up? And I mean, we can learn obviously we can learn something from everyone's path, but just some of these questions, more in depth about like psychology, your growth, your failures, your pains, your successes. those are things that really resonate with me. So that was the impetus for us to start the podcast, was like, I have access because I grew up in this world of basketball. So I have access to these incredible people that are at the pinnacle of of what they do. So I just wanted to be able to share with others that rather than be, hoard that information for myself. And I've learned, for sure that the more you give, the more you receive too. And I think it shows up in my life a lot, and it's something I haven't been great at in my past, but I'm definitely learning to share more and open up more. And it's been really fun.
Well, it's been great. It's really been great having you on the show. And I personally have learned a lot, really learned a lot. And again, having Coby Karl, the head coach of the South Bay Lakers, former pro player in the NBA and in Europe, and host of the Curious Leader podcast. Coby, thank you so much for joining our 76 Capital Leadership Series.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, Wayne. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Well, stay tuned for all the rest of our shows on our 76 Capital Leadership Series, and we look forward to seeing you next time.